And we are live, coming from you from two different parts of the world. Today is my day to be on the Los Angeles Tribune. And today is the day that I get to talk to somebody who I have studied, who I have had the pleasure to already share the screen with earlier this year, and who is just always gracious, even when I make big time zones mistakes. So, just want to point that out that he is in the room and he is coming up because I know that everybody's here to see, hear, and comment with me on the amazing work that Dr. Joe Vitale has given to us. So, welcome, Dr. Joe.
Thank you. Thank you. Been looking forward to this. Thanks for having me here.
Well, thank you for being here. And I know we've had some last minute things. So I love seeing you in your nice little chair. I always see that chair when I go on Instagram and see your lives. I love that chair.
It's my home. I got my library here. I got my lawyer's chair, and I'm just relaxed.
That is good because I love talking about setting up your space.
Mm.
And of course, most people know you for the law of attraction, for the secret, for all of the things you do when it comes to mindset, mind flex. We've talked at the second to last big event about your musical side as well, and I know that has developed further. But how important is it to set up your workspace
Mm.
comfortably? What does that do to us if we set it up a certain way?
Well, it can support you in whatever it is that you're trying to create. The
Mhm.
environment is a reflection of what's going on in your mind. And what we want to do is make it peaceful. We want to make it comfortable. We want to make it inspiring to you and whatever you're doing. And I'm speaking for everybody here.
Mhm.
In my case, I'm obviously a book person. I've written a lot of books. So it should not surprise anybody that I'm surrounded by books. And you can only see the wall behind me, and it's a real wall with real books, no green screen. And there's walls of books over that way, over this way, on the other side. I am in my nest. And I
Mhm.
think what we're doing here is creating our nurturing environment. We're creating it that it helps us achieve whatever it is that we're trying to do in the world. I have little knickknacks around here. I have little things on the shelves behind me. All of those are kind of like triggers, anchors, reminders. All of them support me in doing what I want to do, which is write, create, make films, do all that kind of stuff that I'm doing right here in this chair virtually every day. So our environment is there to support us in creating, achieving, attracting whatever it is we want. And I'll say one more thing about that.
Mhm.
Most people blame their environment when they were growing up for how they are today. And I don't believe that's the case. I mean, we have choice all along the way. But the more important thing is right now, we can change our environment by just moving things around. And that's what's so empowering and so beautiful is that I created my environment. You can create yours.
All right, you just hit on two or three things, and I just love. I always say that, but I love how the universe works. Because this morning I talked about choice in a training I'm doing right now.
Hmm.
And then in the show that I got interviewed on, we started talking about choice. And you just mentioned choice.
Yes.
To me, choice is one of the most important things. And it seems that a lot of people have forgotten that we have a choice.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
how do we find choice?
Yeah. Well, we find choice in every moment. We find choice by sitting here and reflecting on what is there for us to do. And
Mm-hmm.
there's usually a couple things. One is we can do nothing. We can turn on the TV and we can watch Netflix and whatever the latest crazy series is. Or instead of turning on the TV, we can go and write our book or our poem or our song or open our business or put up our website. So we always have a choice in each moment. It's really about becoming conscious of it.
Mm-hmm.
For most of us, we've lived our lives by default. We're
Mm-hmm.
reacting, we're just responding to life, and we're not actually creating life. Now, for your viewers and for the people that would read my material and so forth, they're beyond it. They're at the point now where they are awakening and they realize they have choice. But when I was homeless, I didn't know what my choice was. When I was in poverty, I had a tough time finding what my choice was because my mind was painting me into a corner as a victim.
Mm-hmm.
As I worked on myself and become more and more aware of free will and choices in every moment, I started to choose better things, better moments, better actions. So we always have choice. It's a matter of being reminded of it. And maybe somebody watching right now is being reminded for the very first time that they have choice, that you can choose to live life differently. You can choose to do things differently. I saw Morgan Freeman, the actor, a while back being interviewed, and he was talking about how he had a choice and he had to leave the poverty and the hard circumstances he had in his environment to create an environment that most of us would envy. I mean, with a career and a legacy that is just beyond belief. And he said whenever people complained to him about, well, I'm stuck in my city or in my hometown or in my poverty, he said, the bus leaves every day, man. And I thought that was so beautiful. And I reflected that when I was born and raised in Ohio, I left Ohio by getting on a bus.
Oh.
I got on a bus and ended up in Texas. And it was not easy. There was no overnight success. But had I not got on the bus headed out of town, I might have still lived as Thoreau said, the life of quiet desperation and never realized I have a choice. And so that's the reminder. Yes, we have a choice.
We have a choice whether we take the bus or whether we take the train and all of that. Now, you just mentioned Thoreau, and I don't plan on where a conversation is going. Mm-hmm. Thoreau to me is a fascinating person because he talks about living by himself at Walden Pond, mm-hmm. but very often for dinner he goes to Emerson's house.
That's right.
So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because you also just mentioned there's no overnight success. It wasn't easy.
Right.
How do we know if we're making the right choice? And how do we, in your opinion, make a new choice when necessary?
Yeah, these are great questions. First of all, I am a disciple of Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Mm-hmm. I've called myself a transcendentalist since I learned the words in 1972. And even then, I didn't really know what it meant. It sounded cool. It's like transcendentalist. Mm-hmm. Nobody else knows what it is, so I'll be one of those. But as I've studied Emerson and studied Thoreau, I found that they were pointing to that spiritual world that animates this material world. And so this personally fascinates me, and we can go down that rabbit hole real easily and just keep running because there's so much to talk about there. Yeah. Your question, though, about following your dream, for example, when you don't even know for sure if that's the right dream to follow. Mm-hmm. Both Thoreau and Emerson were in those predicaments at different points in their life. Yes. Emerson was brought up in a family that had ministers, and he began as a minister and found as he was going through being a minister and giving talks at churches, he didn't enjoy it. He found that people liked his speaking, but he didn't particularly like the kind of speaking he was doing. Mm-hmm. He ended up leaving the church, still speaking, became a great orator. He also ended up writing one of his first books. Nobody knew, including him, that it would be a success. And the first book, called Essays, which I think was 1846, is still considered his best work and a classic today. But when he was writing, when he was speaking, there's no evidence around at all that he's doing the right thing. I've often made videos, and apparently you follow me on Instagram.
Mm-hmm, of course.
I post hopefully inspiring videos every day. And I pointed out that in the early days, I decided I was going to be an author. But there was nobody around me encouraging me. There was no evidence around me that I would be an author. I even worked for an oil company, as a cheap employee at one point, and I would write on my lunch hours, and supervisors would make fun of me. And they would say, oh, he thinks he's going to be an author. Well, look at me today. Mm-hmm. I don't know where those people went, and those supervisors are gone. They probably got laid off at some point during oil crises along the way. But I ended up pursuing my dream. So I think the answer to the question is it's a very subjective decision. You make it based on your internal compass. Emerson had his own compass. Thoreau had his own compass. I have my own compass. You have your own compass. For people that are looking on the outside, they might say something like, I wouldn't want to do what Joe Vitale's doing. He's written 80 books. That sounds horrible. That sounds like that's just torturous. But for me, oh my God, that's orgasmic. I love it. I got more books I'm writing, more books coming out. Look at me smiling. I'm thinking about it, going, this is right for me. And that's how we have to answer the question, by going inside ourselves and saying what feels like the right move, right direction, the right mission, the right vocation, even when there's no evidence. Because at first, there won't be any evidence. Not at first. This is when you got to go and stumble around in the dark and hope that it's going to work out.
So, since you're mentioning books, and I had to choose which one I would bring up, okay? But this one seems to be fitting. This one is The Miracle, the 6 Steps to Enlightenment.
Yeah.
So, because we're talking about knowing who you are, in the words of today's world, knowing your purpose, and it's really more about getting there, right? So it's about the gap in between where you are now and where you are. And often we call that self-awareness or enlightenment. Some people claim that we're always enlightened anyhow. So in this book, for example, The Miracle, or in general, finding enlightenment, what does that mean to you? What does enlightenment mean to you? And how do we get it?
Yeah. Well, these are great $1 million questions. The miracle is where I get on a soapbox, because this is where my most recent experiences, research, writing all fall into play. And I basically say there's 2 kinds of miracles. There's the miracle where something happens unexpectedly and maybe without explanation, and we go, oh my God, that was a miracle. That's the miracle most of us are looking for. That's the miracle most of us want. We want to wake up one day and find out, oh, we don't know what happened, but COVID's gone, pandemic's over, everybody go back to work. That would be a miracle, and that would be the kind of miracle I think everybody would agree to. Or personally, somebody might be hoping for something, they're looking for a breakthrough, they're looking for a deal of some sort, and then they get a phone call. And the phone call is like, where did that come from? How did they get my number? How did they know to call me? But there's the deal, and it's done. And that would be called a miracle. So that's the first kind of miracle. And those happen. I believe in magic and miracles. I have signs around me. I don't know if you can see them. One says, expect miracles. Usually I wear a t-shirt that says expect miracles, but today I'm promoting a new electric car coming out. so I'm wearing the Lucid Air t-shirt as my own attempt to give them a nod, a little promo. So the first miracle is the unexpected. The second miracle, though, and this is the one that's better and more important. The second miracle is right now. This is where it's cool. And this is where enlightenment is at. This is where Satori is at. This is where serenity and peace and imperturbability all live. It's in the miracle of now. Almost nobody is here. Not now. Most of us are thinking about the past, like, well, what did we have for breakfast, or the past was better than the future, or what was life like before COVID. We think about the old days. And so a part of us isn't here at all. A part of us is living in the past. The other extreme is going to the future. And we are envisioning better moments, like, well, I can't wait that Joe Vitale's off this show because he's not the best guest. I want somebody else. And so they're missing this moment. Most of us miss this moment. The irony is, this is the only thing that's real. The past is gone. We don't even remember it correctly. There are scientists who are pointing out that when we remember something, we remember it in a very vague, inaccurate way. And the most recent studies say every time you remember something, you lose part of the memory.
Mhm.
What you remember actually didn't even happen, which gets really
Yeah.
spooky. And so here, part of us are living in the past, which means we're not in the moment. We're in the figment of our imagination. Same thing happens with the future. The joy, the power is in this moment. The more we can be in this moment, the more the things we've been wanting to achieve or to attract come to us more easily.
Mhm.
And to take this even a step further, the more we can be in this moment with gratitude, happiness, those states of bliss, the more we will attract the things that we thought would give us happiness and bliss and serenity and contentment. So most of us are playing the game backwards. We're
Mhm.
looking to the future saying, well, when I get the car, I get the house, I get the person, I get the
Right.
man, the woman, blah, 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 then I'll be happy. But the way the formula works is to bring it all the way back here. And in this moment, which is the miracle, be happy now. You still go for what you want, but you're content in this moment. Not only will you more quickly attract what you want, but you will already have what you were seeking anyway, which was the happiness of right now. So my whole book is all about those two miracles with a big emphasis on the miracle of right now.
So the miracle of right now,
Yes.
the the being instead of the doing, right? The being and the enjoying of what is. Um, would you also say that the miracle is not just in the present, but the miracle is actually you as a being?
Well, yes, that goes to the next level of awakening here. That's understanding, which I love your questions because you're kind of guiding everybody right where they need to go or where I would like us all to go. And it's understanding that we're spiritual beings in a material world. We're spiritual beings housed in flesh. It's almost like this is the flesh suit. This is my outfit
Mm-hmm.
that I was sent to earth to wear. And I get to change it a little bit, put on different shirts, lose weight, gain weight, whatever happens to be. But basically, this is my uniform. But the spiritual person is inside of it. And that's what our wake up is to realize we're spiritual beings having a human material experience. When we associate more with the spiritual, now we start to come from that beingness. We're not as caught up in doing. We still do. That's a very important aspect of creation. We still take action. You mentioned music. I have 15 albums. We talked about books. I have 80 some books. You don't just sit and visualize and meditate and think about that many albums or that many books and produce them.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, you have to actually go in the studio or go to your computer or typewriter, wherever you're doing the work. So all of this is to say, I really believe life is a process of awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're awakening to is our own divinity. Our divinity in ourselves, which helps us realize the miracle of right now, also helps us realize our point of power and our inner power is all inside of us, connected to the universal, but at the same time, it's inside of us. And the more that we align ourselves mentally with that, the easier life gets, the more we are happy, we can be healthier, we can be more productive, we can produce more, probably more profitable. There's a whole mouthful that comes out of that alignment.
You just mentioned something, and I'm going to go controversial.
Here, let's do it.
Because you just said, we're, and I'm paraphrasing, but we are, part of divinity. We are divine in ourselves. Some people would say that that's blasphemy. What's your response to that?
Well, what I'm talking about is being God. Mm-hmm. We are not the God, we are a God. And I'm quoting Bill Murray in the famous movie Groundhog Days, where after repeatedly waking up and going through the same experiences, he realizes and says at breakfast, he says, I'm God. And then he quickly says, I'm not the God, I'm a God. Mm-hmm. And from that standpoint, I don't think it's a sin. I don't think there's any sort of crime being said. I think this is part of our awakening. So when I say we awaken to our own divinity, I'm not saying I'm in control of the universe. I'm not saying you're in control of the universe. You're in control of your universe. I'm in control of my universe. But I don't have the power to manipulate you or anybody else that might be watching at this point. And to go even further, this is a gift from God. This awakening to our own spiritual power within our human experience is something that has been given to us. Maybe nobody told us before. Maybe we didn't believe it if they did say it before, but it's been waiting as a gift. It's a little bit like saying we have that power of choice, and somebody saying, oh no, I can't have power of choice. I only want to do what God does or wants me to do. But God is saying, I gave you power of choice so you would choose what you would like to create in the world. Right. So there's a lot of mind games people can play to kind of self-sabotage themselves and escape taking responsibility for their own power and their own possibility. And so again, as you point out, it may be controversial, but I think that's part of the wake-up call.
And now you just mentioned the word create, right?
Yeah.
And I often tell people, I used to tell students, now I tell clients and everybody I run around with, that we are co-creators.
Yes.
Right? So we create our own universe, as you pointed out, and we're in charge of that. And if we choose to give our power away and let somebody else create it, then we're allowing them to co-create. What is in your point of view, what is our responsibility or accountability when it comes to our universe and co-creation of everything in our lives? Because that's often one that people don't like to talk about.
Well, that's also an example of people being willing to take their power. A lot of people are afraid of their own power. They're afraid of it because of beliefs that they might do something wrong, that they might make a mistake, that it might even be inaccurate, maybe that they're actually being led down a bad road and they'll end up regretting it. So a lot of people are afraid to take their own power because they have a lot of beliefs about power. But let me back up. First of all, I absolutely agree with you. Life is a co-creation. Co-creation. It's a co-creation between you and me, and it's a co-creation between you and me and the universe. And the universe could be called the divine, it can be called Gaia, it can be called God, it can be called nature. There's all kind of different words that we use for universe. But the universe is giving us life, and it's also giving us ideas. And those ideas are being downloaded to you, to me, and to everybody watching. We have free will. This goes back to the choice we talked about. We can say, no, thanks. I don't want that idea. I don't want to write my next book. I don't want to make a music album. I'm going to go watch Netflix and get a 9-to-5 job and just sack groceries somewhere. You have the freedom to do that. That's part of free will. But here's my own controversial, but I hope inspiring secret stance. And that is, the universe has a mission for you. Everybody, not just you or just me, but everybody watching. We've all been assigned a mission. Now, the mission could be big or small, depending on how you look at it and depending on who you are. If you have the ability to cure COVID, please go do so and do it today. But if you're also being assigned to make the best carrot cake muffins for the local bakery, and that's what you enjoy doing, and it feels like that's your assignment, then go do it. But each of us has some sort of assignment. Apparently, mine has been to write books, to write music, to appear on stages, to speak, to hopefully inspire people through things like this. So I'm following my mission. But I could have said no a long time ago. And even with these books that still come to me as inspired ideas, I can still say no. But I believe that when you say yes, life gets a little easier, life gets a little richer, life gets a little bit more exciting, life gets a little bit more memorable in all kinds of ways, and you co-create something that makes a difference. So all of this is saying, yeah, I totally agree with you. We are here to co-create with each other and with divinity, the different things each of us have been assigned to do. And all we have to do is look within ourselves and say, I wonder what my assignment is, and wait for inspiration. That's the other thing. You're good, Natalie, because you get me going, and then I can just keep talking, but you're so polite and so professional, you let me just keep running. And it's like, well, you can leave now, Natalie, because I'm busy talking. But I want to, all kidding aside, I want to say one more thing. And that is the idea that when we follow our personal mission, it feels euphoric to do so. Nobody else may understand it, but it came to you and it is for you. And it's a co-creation with the universe. When you do that, wow, stand back, because the heavens open and the blessings appear.
Absolutely. And sometimes I think there is a certain sense of calm, right? Like once you know what you're here to do, what your assignment is, so to speak, I often think that there's a certain calmness. It's just like, no, this is my path. Throw at me what you want. This is my path. And then, of course, the euphoric idea comes with it. Now, I love writing too. So I love to talk about books. And right now, half of my books aren't here. So, I'll have to deal with that. But when it comes to writing, because I know a lot of people right now are writing books, there are a lot of open calls for contributors to anthologies and all of that. We do that as well, but how do you write? And what I mean by that is, I know that one of your books is called Hypnotic Writing, even though it's more about sales, but there is this automated writing, or this, you said it comes through you. So when you write a book, do you sit down every day for an hour, or does it just come flushing out? How do you do it?
Well, that's a great question. Since I've written 80 some books, probably everyone has its own unique story. There have been books where it just kind of descended on me and I felt like, here it comes, and I better just get to a computer quick and start typing. In fact, my book, Zero Limits, which is one of the most popular books I've ever written. It's the book that introduced Ho'oponopono to the world. I wrote that book in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. Yes, that book right there. I wrote it in 2 weeks and I felt inspired. I just felt like it's coming. There's the story. I just got to sit down and type. I almost felt like a stenographer. I almost felt like a stenographer because I was typing and there it was. And it's one of the few books that I've actually reread that I wrote, because when I read it, it's almost like I didn't write it. It just kind of came through. And so there's the example of that. The lightning bolt hits and I sit down and I'm being fried at the computer as I'm typing as fast as I can. So that was Zero Limits. But then there's books like, I wrote a book on P.T. Barnum that you know, called There's a Customer Born Every Minute. And I'm very proud of the book. That was way back in 98. So that's before The Secret and a lot of the fame that came from a lot of other things that I've done. And that book took me a year. It took 6 months of research because P.T. Barnum was more than the circus guy. He was an author, he was a speaker, he was a politician, he was an entrepreneur, he was a publicist, he was a very spiritual person. And he lived during the time of the Civil War, and Emerson and Thoreau and Mark Twain and the gang. And he was fascinating. But I really had to research him for a good 6 months. And then when I went to write the book, it probably took another 6 months for me to do it. So everyone is different. But I want to say something that I think will be inspiring to people, because I've helped hundreds, if not thousands, of people write books. And I tell them 2 or 3 things that I've learned that make a difference. One is, when you sit down to write your book, don't edit, just write. That is one of the big takeaways. And I know you would know this, but not everybody else does. They get it as a breath of fresh air. So what I'm saying, when you are writing, I got my keyboard in front of me. If I was typing, I would just keep typing. And even if my mind said, oh, you got that wrong, or that's boring, or you made a mistake, or you left out a date, or I can't remember what he said, I would say, I'll add it later. It's called brain dumping. Get the first draft done. Write with a white hot heat. The next thing you would do is edit later. They're 2 different processes. And this is something everybody needs to hear, because most of us write and edit together. We write a line, then we change it, then we write another line, then we change it. And that ends up being torturous. People go, I don't like writing. Well, no wonder. You're fighting yourself as you go. Mark Twain had said at one point that if we were all taught to speak the same way we were taught to write, we'd all stutter. And what he meant was, as I'm speaking, if I was revising my dialogue in the course of talking to you, it would just be stop and start. And I'd go, I can't talk. I can't get the words out. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is find what is the easy way for you to write. For some people, it's speaking. Now, my most famous story here, and I get choked up when I tell it. My father was one of the greatest storytellers of all time. And he polished his stories because he told them over and over and over again. And so I heard him, but every time he told the story, as many times as I heard it, was always great. And I said, Dad, why don't you record your stories? And he said, for what reason? And I said, well, you could have an autobiography. Record it for us. At some point, you'll be gone. So he was taking care of my dying mother at the time. But he would get up in the morning. He'd do a little workout. He'd turn on a cassette player. He didn't know how to use CDs or computers, but he knew what a cassette player was and a 90-minute cassette. And every morning, he would tell a few stories. And he kept that going for months. Then one day, he's in Ohio, I'm in Texas. He mails me a box. And the box has a cassette player in it and 9 90-minute cassettes. And I take those and think, well, I got to find somebody who has a cassette player that can transcribe these. And I did. And so all of those 90-minute cassettes were transcribed. So now I have text. Then I read it and tried to organize it in some sort of chronological order. And then I gave it to an editor and said, just polish it up a little bit so it reads well. Then I went to an artist and said, I need a cover for this, what is going to be my father's book. And then after all of this, remember, my father did not write a word. He spoke. He recorded it. He gave me tapes. I transcribed them. We edited them. We put them into book form. I made a cover. I uploaded it to Amazon, which today anybody could use to do a print-on-demand book. You can make one copy, which is what I did. I made one copy of my father's now published, printed autobiography. And on his 90th birthday, I flew to Ohio and said, Dad, do you remember that box of cassettes you gave me? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I turned it into your autobiography, and I gave him his book. I got chills now. It was one of the few times in my life that I saw my father speechless. And he had tears in his eyes. And he went, oh, my God. And he took it like it was priceless, which it was. And he said, I can't believe it. And the rest of my family was around the table, and they didn't know what I was doing. We filmed all of this. There's a YouTube video. I think it's called 90-Year-Old Man Becomes Author or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I, as I was growing up, could never give my father anything. He would give it back. He'd make fun of it. He'd destroy it. He was born in the Great Depression in America in 1925. So he's a few years old when the Depression hits in 1929. And he lived his life that way. Like, I don't want anything and I don't need anything. But when I made him an author, he accepted something he never thought he would have in his life. Mm. And we did autograph parties together, which is... I'm pretty much speechless now. I'm trying to give people the sense that if you're not comfortable writing, you don't have to write. You can speak it. Many books have been spoken, then transcribed, edited, and turned into a book. So however you get it done, there are numerous shortcuts and hacks and things that would make it easier for you. And this is a subject I can talk about for, probably weeks, and tell stories on every aspect of it, and something I absolutely love. I love books and authors.
And I think it's amazing because there are so many stories that are gone missing. I say this, partially as a human being, partially as a historian, because I know how many things have fallen through the cracks.
Yes.
And the other thing that I love about what you said, because I agree, there are people who can't type very well. So, we've got these phones now. They have all a voice recorder, and sometimes I have the best ideas when I'm walking out in nature, and I have some ideas. But the other thing also is, and even though I wasn't necessarily wanting that happening, but my daughter sometimes chooses to draw a diary. So we just took a trip. And I said, well, but, because we're doing this trip, you got to write a little bit of a diary of what you did. And, she also loves to write. But then she said, you know what? I'm going to draw it. And that's another way. You can draw your thoughts as well, or your diary. So as long as it gets out, I think it's really, really important to get out. And there are a couple more questions I have for you, but we have to just take a little break. So bear with me, because I want to talk more about that zero limits idea. So we'll be right back. Just bear with us for a second.
Hello and welcome to the Los Angeles Tribune. Since 1886, our name has been a part of the world of journalism. We've earned a reputation for being a publication that practices integrity, authenticity, and responsibility. For general inquiries, contact today. Thank you on behalf of the Los Angeles Tribune team.
Because the Los Angeles Tribune is putting on all of these fascinating shows where we see people like Joe Vitale talk about a range of issues. And we're right now talking about zero limits. And this, of course, is not just a book, it's a guide, and it talks about the secret, of course. It talks about the Hawaiian system, it talks about wealth, it talks about health. It talks about a number of things that bring us together as we're having this human experience. And after that, you wrote another book, and that is the fifth phrase. And there you talk about the next and the healing stage. So can you explain how those two books fit together? Because I think there's a time difference of about, my math is right, about not 8 years, 7, 8 years.
It's actually a lot more than that, because zero limits. Oh, it's easy. Let me reflect here. Zero Limits came out, I think, in 2005. Okay. And 10 years after it, I wrote a second book called At Zero.
Yes.
And then most recently, which is putting it around 15 years since the first book, I wrote what you're calling the fifth phrase.
Okay.
This is the trilogy of books that I've contributed around Ho'oponopono. So first of all, for those that don't know, Ho'oponopono is a spiritual healing system. At the most simplistic level, it's saying 4 key phrases inside yourself to your connection to God, the divine, the universe, the higher power, nature, Gaia. Everybody has a different word for this source. And so we say these 4 phrases to our relationship to it. It's kind of like a prayer, kind of like a petition. And the goal of the 4 phrases is to remove what is in you that is participating in the creation of what you're perceiving to be a problem. And I'm really oversimplifying this. Obviously, I wrote 3 books. So to say this in a moment or two is a bit of a challenge. So the 4 phrases there: I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. The other t-shirt I usually wear says, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you on it. But today is Promote Lucid Air Day. Lucid Motors, their new electric car. They don't even know I'm wearing the t-shirt.
But I think I saw you post that on Facebook too, the Lucid car. I think I saw that. Yeah.
I did. I reserved one of their electric cars, which they're only starting to make now. And so I'm fairly excited about it. And this is, it's worth looking as a side note. People talk about marketing and selling, and they say they don't like it. A lot of people complain about it. And that used to confuse me until I realized, wait a minute, they don't understand that marketing and selling is really sharing. When you share your love, your passion for your product or service, other people might think it's selling, but you are actually just sharing. That's what I'm doing. I'm talking about the Lucid Motors new electric car called the Lucid Air, and I put money down to reserve one of them. I'm not thinking of this as marketing. I'm thinking of this as if I'm a 5-year-old boy who's really excited about the baseball game coming up. You hear the difference? And I
But
think
see, I just like the word. I just like the name.
what
I'm thinking
lucid,
lucid dreaming. I'm like, I'm going down that avenue.
right? Let's go down the lucid motors avenue here.
Right.
So all of that is just to say, let's reframe marketing and let
Mhm.
marketing be about sharing your love for whatever it is that you bring to the world. That'll transform people's even relationship to money. So Ho'oponopono, the key phrases: I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. You're saying them inside yourself. To give a quick example, if somebody, well, probably people watching right now have a problem or two going on in their lives. And if they think of that problem, which could be another person, it could be an employee, it could be a spouse, it could be a family member, it could be the neighbor, it could be a customer. Think about whatever the problem is that's going on for somebody right now.
Mhm.
As you're thinking about that problem, note that where you feel the problem is in you. You don't feel the problem out there. There is nothing to feel out there. You might say there's a trigger out there. My next door neighbor is leaving the garbage can on my front porch. And so that's bothering you. But the feeling of it bothering you is not out there. The trigger is out there. The feeling's in you. So that's the first thing, is to realize the feeling is in you. What we do next is want to remove the uncomfortable feeling. We're doing it with a petition to the divine saying, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. Which is really shorthand for saying, I'm sorry, I don't know what part of me is involved in this. Please forgive me for being unconscious and having whatever data is playing out to attract this experience in my life. Thank you for releasing it. Thank you for removing it. Thank you for cleaning it up. Thank you for deleting whatever the negative beliefs are in my brain. I love you for this process. I love you for my life. I love you for resolving this. So the 4 phrases are a shorthand for something that's more enlarged. And what we're looking for is for the divine, God, to come in, co-create the healing. Now, what's interesting is that as this happens and you start to feel the dissipation, you return to peace, whatever it was on the outer goes away. Yeah. It remedies itself, it fixes itself, it moves on. It's no longer in your world, or even if for some reason it was, it no longer bothers you because you took care of it inside. This is huge. And I got to say one more thing for those who don't know. And I retell the story in every one of those books, Zero Limits, At Zero, and the 5th Phrase. I first heard of Ho'oponopono because I heard the most unbelievable story of a therapist who helped heal mentally insane criminals in a mental hospital in Hawaii. Mm. And he did it not by working on the patients, but by working on himself. Mm. The patients were shackled and sedated. They were mentally ill criminals. They were locked away in a mental hospital in Hawaii. Nurses, doctors were quitting because the place was hell. It was despicable. They couldn't stand to be there. But they needed to have a doctor on staff for their licensing and their funding and whatever else politically that takes place. And they found this doctor who said, I'll come, but I'm not going to do traditional therapy. He did Ho'oponopono. He did it on himself. When he looked at their files and he saw that they were doing things that repulsed him, instead of trying to change the inmate, which is what everybody else was trying to do and they couldn't do it, he changed his view. He changed himself. He changed the inner experience that was bothering him. And this is where the miracle took place. It's the first kind of miracle. Remember, we were talking about those earlier. Yeah. As he healed himself, the patients got better. Within months, they didn't have to be shackled. They didn't have to be sedated. Months after that, they started to be pronounced as healthy and normal and released into society. It's amazing. And so all of this is from Ho'oponopono. And I remember hearing the first story, and I thought, if it can do that, what can it do for you and me and our petty little real world problems that we go through every day? So all of the books talk about it. Zero Limits tells the first story, gives the basic questions. At Zero, which I wrote 10 years later, goes into more depth. By then I had heard every question in the book, so I put all the questions in the books. But then as I kept practicing Ho'oponopono, I was inspired with what I call the 5th phrase. And the 5th phrase took me a whole book to write, which is the one that you brought up. That is the most recent one out now, all of them on Amazon.
Right.
That one.
So when we're talking about healing, when we're talking about gratitude and forgiveness, do we need healing as human beings, or is that something that some people in society tell us because they want us to believe that we're broken?
Interesting question. We need to heal our perception that we need to heal.
I like that.
And as you know, you and I didn't talk before this, so I didn't know what your questions would be. And apparently you didn't know what your questions would be either.
No, I don't.
And so I didn't know what my answers would be. This is very much an inspired, improv, divinely guided kind of dance between us. And it's a co-creation. And I believe that a line like what I just gave you came from the divine, sparked from you in this moment. And so I really believe that it's our mind that is keeping some sort of checks and balances of our life and decides that, well, you fell short here. You need to hold a grudge here, or you need to forgive over here. And so the mind, which in almost all the traditional spiritual traditions, all say the mind is the one that's going to take you away from the moment, take you away from the miracle, take you away from now. I don't know if you read Napoleon Hill's book it was unpublished in his lifetime, but came out most recently. It was called Outwitting the Devil. Napoleon Hill's book, Outwitting the Devil, never published during his lifetime. I read it and my hands began to sweat because I realized outwitting the devil he was referring to is your own mind. And that mind, as much as we love it, because we think, well, this, my mind's my buddy. It's keeping me safe. It's getting me through life. And at the same time, the mind is keeping us separated and chasing rabbits and thinking that there's a lot of things wrong with us that in reality probably aren't there. So there you go, all prompted from your great question.
Okay, I got another one. Maybe that's not that great, but I hear what you're saying, and it makes perfect sense. And I love outwitting the devil. Now, to me, the mind in that is actually not our mind. It's actually the socially conditioned mind that tells us to fear, that tells us to stay limited, to not believe in zero limits, but to be limited. So that's why I always talk about detoxing the mind, to get all that stuff out. So I'm pondering whether I want to agree with you, whether I disagree with you, or whether it's a mix.
So I would offer this, and we're both being vulnerable here, and we're both being authentic here. I would offer the challenge of what part of you wants to disagree.
The socially conditioned mind.
Yeah, I would think that it's our beliefs that are bumping against other beliefs. This is why, again, I feel our whole purpose in life is to awaken. What are we awakening to? Our own divinity. What's in the way of us experiencing divinity? All of our upbringing, our programming, our social conditioning, our indoctrination, our downloading of everybody else's belief system. It's not bad. This is the way the human experience has been throughout history. We've downloaded our parents downloaded their parents. As we grow up, or until the age of 5, 6, 7 years old, depending on what research you look at, we're downloading everybody. We're not thinking for ourselves. We're looking around, finding out, how do you live in the world? We're seeing Earth for the very first time through the eyes of a baby who has almost no programming whatsoever. And so if the father or mother believes that money's evil, we end up thinking money's evil until we get to a point where we read a book or we hear an interview or there's an aha, and we snap that one and pop it and clean it off. But for most of us, we have what you're talking about with the social conditioning, but it's there. before COVID and the pandemic, I was traveling to countries I didn't know existed. Mm-hmm. And every single country has their own programming. Yeah. When I went to Russia, and you just stay there a few days even, and you talk to people and see how their culture acts, and you find out they grew up differently than I did in Ohio in America. And then when I was in Iran, I was in Iran before pandemic hit and stopped most of the travels. And I was amazed to see what their culture was like. They're all different. And the people that grow up in these different cultures have a different programming than you or I. So we're all being downloaded this information. Hopefully it serves us. It's designed to help us survive. But I believe we're designed to actually awaken and thrive, not just survive.
Agreed. And it's very important, I think, to be open-minded and encounter all these different cultures. I think it enriches us, and then we can pick and choose what we want. In all of this, we're talking from a spiritual level. And I'm thinking about the event that's coming up. So, the event that you are also part of course, which is called The New Psychology of Winning, which is in November.
Yeah.
The word winning itself and the culture of winning. How do you feel about the word winning?
Well, I know where they're coming from. At least I know where they were coming from in the past, because Dennis Waitley, Bob Proctor, these are legends. These are icons. These are the guys I studied probably when I was still in poverty. And going to the library to get my books, I'm reading the works of these people that are now my friends, which part of me is, my mind is melted trying to get my head around that, because I'm a baby compared to them. I'm a puppy. I'm a kitten compared to their knowledge and their wisdom. I believe they're talking about achieving things when they talk about winning. I believe that they're talking about, you set a sales goal, you want to hit the sales goal. That would be winning. If you have a health goal, you got to go run a marathon or something, and you're working out every day. When you run the marathon, you won. You are winning. I believe that's where they're coming from. And I totally understand it, because for the longest time, that was my definition of winning. If I went for a result and I got the result, I won. But I'm not saying I'm beyond it, but I'm adding to it. And what I'm adding to it is the spiritual awareness that it's all a game, and no matter what happens, I win, and so does everybody else. There's no losers. And that it's all about awakening to power and potential, not just comparing bottom line results. So I don't know, did I answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the reason why I'm asking is because there's that social conditioned mind of winning, which always has me against somebody else, or somebody else wins, somebody loses. And I don't believe in all those opposites. So to me, winning is, I only win if everybody wins. I mean, I want to make money to survive, to live, but I don't just want to get money. I want to serve in order to get it. And that way everybody wins. So that's why I'm looking forward to this event and hearing all these amazing experts, authorities, the teachers who I have studied, including I've studied you as well. Now, show is about over. And I know you have to run as well. But before I let you go, is there anything that you'd like to just share as the final nugget, the final thought of today with anybody who's watching now, watching later? Anything that you would like to say, it's all yours.
Oh my goodness. She's giving me a blank check to say whatever I want. And I'm a guy who's written 80 books, so I have a lot to say. I think I want to remind people of something that either they've forgotten or maybe they never even knew. Because of not only the pandemic, but for the last 2 to 3 years were pretty rough for me too. I went through a divorce that was a persecution in my life and business. My father died, the one I was talking about that I helped make an author. Best friend died. A family member attempts suicide. I get into a new relationship with somebody who develops neural Lyme disease and is on her deathbed. And while going through divorce, COVID, and everything else, I'm her caretaker while trying to survive myself. And I think what we all tend to forget is we can focus on the things that we want to achieve and we want to attract, and we can meditate, we can visualize, we can do the vision boards, but we've got to remember that we're in the life experience, which means some days it'll rain, some days you're going to get your feet muddy, some days there'll be disappointments, some days there'll be bumps in the road, but as long as we realize this too will pass, we can get through it. I think the danger is when somebody discovers The Secret or discovers some of my books or Ho'oponopono or any number of things that promises a better life, when they start to think they'll never have a problem again, that's the danger. Because as soon as they have a challenge and there's something that stalls or disappoints them, they could give up. They could become a critic. They could become a skeptic, and suddenly their life is no longer joyous. So I think my reminder is, yes, go for your dreams. Absolutely go for your dreams. But if one day it rains, just take an umbrella and go dance in the rain.
I love that. And I love singing in the rain too. You know? Plus, something that we always say in Hamburg, we always say that when you take an umbrella, it's not going to rain.
Right.
Dr. Joe, thank you so much. I so appreciate you making the time to running in circles just to be here. I love our conversations, and I have learned a lot from you, and I know I will continue to learn from you, and I will continue to follow you on Instagram and everywhere else you go. Thank you so much.
Oh, I really love this. Anytime you want to do it. And I'll see you on the big event in whenever it is, November.
November, yes.
Right.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.